To better understand the stories and movies we consume, it's important to understand the narrators that tell these stories. Specifically, unreliable narrators, the types of narrators that appear unreliable, what each type says and how it's used in literature, and what each type says about us as people. Now, I'd like to begin with a story. When I was young, before I could even walk, I crawled into my living room while my mom was vacuuming. Now, my hand slid under the carpet, and because my mom didn't see it when she drove the vacuum near me, it burned through the carpet and gave me this scar on my left hand. Now, I know what you might be thinking. A vacuum cleaner burning you? That's a little silly, it's a little absurd, and you'd actually be right, because the story I just told you was false, therefore making me an unreliable narrator. But what are the actual types that appear in literature? Well, first we have the deceiver. That's the category that I would have fit into. It is a narrator that purposefully hides and manipulates events of a story in order to fool the reader. Next, we have the misinformed narrator. Similar to the deceiver, they misinterpret the plot and the situations of the story, but they themselves don't realize that they've misinformed the reader. They are not in on the truth. And then we have the delusional narrator. These narrators are mentally ill, or they hallucinate, and they create completely false narratives inside the story itself that the reader gets lost in with the narrator. But how is each type used in the story itself? Well, the deceiver usually hides the truth throughout the entire story, and by the end, there's a big twist that reveals the narrator to be a deceiver, and it leaves the audience feeling betrayed. Where now the misinformed narrator is a little bit more subtle. To pick out a misinformed narrator, readers must actively read between the lines and sniff out whether the events that the narrator are portraying are the truth or just how that narrator perceives the truth. And finally, the delusional narrators immerse the reader in their delusions. They pull them in and show the readers what the world looks like from their twisted point of view. And now that you know the types of unreliable narrators and how they're used, what do authors use them to say thematically? Well, the deceiver usually shows how we as people tend to lie to each other, for whether it be for self-gain or to make ourselves feel better. But we do these things to try and manipulate the world to be how we want it. Then we have the misinformed narrator. These narrators show us how, even though we may think we are seeing truth, that really reality is being warped through our own complex and often misguided perspective. And then usually these perspectives are influenced by our life experiences or a lack thereof. Like a innocent child would see a situation a lot differently than a grown adult. And then we have the delusional narrator. These narrators show the horrors of insanity and the tragedy that is descending into madness. They show us how fragile our perspectives are and how these delusions and hallucinations can trick us and lead us to darker places. Altogether, these narrators show us how the world is actually pretty black and white, and that it is us as complex people who paint it gray. Now, in conclusion, we learned about the types of unreliable narrators, how each type is used in literature, and what each type says about us as humans. As I finish, I would like to leave you, or at the beginning of the speech, I established myself as an unreliable narrator. I told you a false story and then revealed that it was false to help make my point. But as a deceiver, I have one last truth to reveal. The story that I told you at the beginning is actually true. Thank you.